How much of a missed opportunity was this weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix for Lando Norris? Can Max Verstappen actually get into the title hunt? And are we about to watch the last 7 races of Yuki Tsunoda's Formula One career? This is On Track, talkSPORT's motorsports show. After the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku, we are going to unpick everything that happened in the race, all of the big stories that have come out of that race in terms of the championship battle, and also a few other bits as well. I'm John Jackson. Joining me, as ever, to look back at this F1 masterpiece is Piers, former British F3 driver and Sky Sports commentator for the F3 Championship and the Porsche Super Cup as well. Piers, you were talking about this on talkSPORT. You were doing the updates, kind of a crazy weekend in Azerbaijan. And I think you know that I base Azerbaijan, I base kind of races and how difficult the tracks are as a non-driver on how difficult I find them on the F1 game. And Azerbaijan, along with Monaco, is one of those tracks where I go, you know what? I'm going to crash out of this race. I don't know why I'm bothering doing it. I might as well skip it because it is just one of those tracks where the margin for error is incredibly small. And I think if we go back to qualifying, we saw that with all the red flags.
Yeah, the margin for error is certainly small, but it was the wind and the weather this weekend was the thing that threw a spanner in the works. And it sounds like a poor excuse for the drivers. You know, the best drivers in the world, Formula One teams, a bit of wind, get on with it. But these cars, it's hard to explain how sensitive single-seater cars with, wings on are to the wind. It can completely change the way you do a corner. I mean, even in British F3, when I was racing, I remember specifically at Snetterton, turn 1, if it was a slight headwind, was flat out. Turn 1, if it was a slight tailwind, was brake and change down a gear, which, and that's in a corner where there's lots of runoff. That's not a barrier on the exit, and you're not doing 200 miles an hour, and you don't have buildings funneling the wind through. So that made qualifying absolutely chaos. Wasn't it a record number of red flags in a qualifying session? The qualifying session was longer than the race, made for a jumbled up grid. Somehow Max Verstappen still slapped it on pole, and it looked like we were in for an absolute classic on Sunday.
Yeah, so we're going to pick this apart. Obviously, we're going to look at other things as the show goes on. But Max Verstappen did take the race win. Sorry to spoil that if you haven't watched it yet, but I think by now you probably have watched that. And he did so from pole position. I think it was a Grand Slam, actually, because I think he also got the fastest lap as well. And we'll look into, in the second part of this show, more about Max Verstappen and how actually, quietly, he's probably having the best season of any of the drivers on the grid. We also need to talk about what happened between the McLarens. But the final result was Max Verstappen, George Russell, who's another driver we've talked about a lot on this show this year, and also Carlos Sainz getting Williams' first podium for an incredibly long time, and his first after moving to Williams this season from Ferrari last year, of course. When we look back at qualifying then, I think, the big story there was the McLarens were nowhere. I mean, Oscar Piastri had a big old shunt, and Lando Norris had the opportunity to maybe get on the front row of the grid, but he didn't quite put the lap together, giving the advantage to Max Verstappen once again, like we saw only a couple of weekends ago at Monza.
I don't think Norris and the McLarens will be too worried about Verstappen. I think, there's an outside chance he could still be in the championship hunt, but I think realistically it would take some pretty unexpected circumstances from both McLaren drivers for the remainder of the season for Max to be in there. But this is an opportunity when Oscar biffed it in quali, which is something we don't often see and make a mistake, especially in qualifying when it comes to that final lap. Crash through the wall, was going to start 9th. If Lando was anywhere near the top 3 or 4 positions, he could have had a massive championship swing here. He could have taken it well within a race win in terms of points, of 25 points to win. I think he went into the weekend at 31 points ahead or behind. Norris was behind Piastri, but couldn't extract much more of it. I mean, Piastri crashed and Norris only started literally directly ahead of him, 2 places ahead on the grid, and then didn't really do much from there. I mean, Piastri didn't help himself with the crash in Q3 and then a crash on lap 1. Not exactly too good subsequent laps for him. But Norris definitely, actually, in his post-race interview, he said it wasn't a missed opportunity. It was just one of those things. I did the best I could. It was a missed opportunity. It really, really was.
Yeah, so as you say, he's eaten into Oscar Piastri's lead by 6 points. You've said before that to win this championship, Lando Norris will have to beat Oscar Piastri fairly consistently for the last few races of the season, but also make up a decent amount of points. 6 points is kind of on par with if, Lando had won the race and Oscar had come second. It's that kind of small gap. which is exactly what he didn't want. Now, let's talk about Oscar Piastri to start with, because I think we have to be fair. We have said some things about Lando Norris this year where I think we now have to say them about Oscar Piastri, because we've been saying how great Oscar Piastri's been and how, look, he just doesn't make mistakes. He made one in Melbourne, and since then we've seen just no mistakes. He's very cool, he's very calm, he's very collected. And this weekend, it's, he's made quite a lot of mistakes. And there's one in qualifying, there's the start of the race, then there's the first lap, which saw him exit the race and become the only driver actually to not finish the race. What do you think's the result of this? Is it just an off weekend for a driver? Is it that the pressure's getting to him? It doesn't feel to me like the pressure at this stage with that was with 8 races, including this race to go in the season, that would be necessarily getting to him. He's in a great position. It's his title to lose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it still is his title to lose, because he's still got a whole race win of points ahead of Lando Norris, which Norris has to overcome. Assuming that there's no more DNFs, then Norris has to basically win all the races going forward with Piastri in second. Again, we said that a week ago, and then here they are, nowhere near the top 3 positions. But it's very much Piastri to lose. I think that this is going to ignite a fire in Piastri, really hone down, because, he's a very matter-of-fact, simple, take it as it comes, just concentrate on the important things. And I think he'll take this weekend as didn't perform very well that weekend, but he knew he wasn't as fast as Norris. He knew he wasn't going to be probably up there in qualifying. He wasn't comfortable in practice. Pushed a bit too hard on that lap in the wall in Q3, led to a difficult situation. Knew he needed to get a good start, jumped the start, then made pushing too hard. I think he'll think, right, in those situations, he'll take stock, and I think he'll use it to push on forward. And, it's going to be one way or the other. It's either going to do that, or he's going to start to then, maybe if he starts the next weekend on the back foot and then finishes behind Norris, it could be a slippery slope downwards. But we haven't seen that sort of evidence from Piastri before. He seems very level-headed. On the flip side, we've spoken about potentially Lando's mistakes. Yes, Oscar made the mistakes this weekend, but we haven't seen, subsequent mistakes and subsequent weekends and a consistent, recurrence of that yet. Who knows? But if Piastri takes this and uses it to become a stronger driver, then it's potentially even going to be harder for Norris to best him for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, you have a feeling that's what will happen. I don't know whether off the top of your head you can remember any moments in his junior career that Oscar maybe had a bad race and how he's turned it around, and whether he's got form of using this. But I enjoyed that he has had his own meme this year. I feel like we've had quite a lot of memes this year, and he's now got the meme of him with his feet up watching the rest of the race after crashing out of the first lap from behind one of the barriers on a phone. So we had obviously Charles Leclerc watching on a phone in Zandvoort. We've now got Oscar Piastri watching on a phone here as well. And actually, quite a lot of action went on in front of him, I think. So he got an amazing seat, seat that would have cost thousands of pounds if you were an F1 fan. But I imagine crashing out of the first lap and watching the rest of the race, presumably because he couldn't get back to the pit lane because it being a street track, a lot will go through his mind. And you would imagine that the debrief will be pretty intense there, and they'll be looking to fire on all cylinders when it comes to Singapore. So I would say he's got away with one this weekend, because if you think about it, if Lando had gone on and had a better qualifying and he had gone on to win the race, that it would have been 19 more points out of his lead. As it stands, it's just 6 points. So would you agree that he's kind of got away with one, Oscar?
Absolutely, he's got away with one. I think he got away with 2 this weekend. I think he got away with it in qualifying, and I think he got away with it in the race as well, because I think most people would have expected Norris to at least move forward, but he qualified and finished in the same place. He didn't move forward from his grid position. I mean, that was, again, listening to Norris's post-race interview, said that he maximised it, impossible to overtake, the win. I can't help feeling that Norris could have, because he will have known that Piastri was out of the race, could have knuckled down. There was a couple of opportunities, even at the end of the race when he was attacking Tsunoda. I think he, a Max Verstappen in that situation would have, I think, been a bit more decisive, gone for the inside. Norris chose to try and go the outside and cut back, which is a bit of a passive move as a racing driver. You really need to take the opportunities when they come to you if you want to go out there and win a championship. And when your rival's out, every single point that you gain is putting you one step closer to that championship. And he just didn't quite have enough today. Who knows, if Oscar was still out there, maybe Oscar would have been stuck right behind him as well, and it would have been a similar story. But it just seems disappointing for him, and I'm sure he will be disappointed that he couldn't have capitalized on a situation that would have been a massive point swing.
It was also disappointing for McLaren. Now, granted, I didn't actually see much of the build-up. I didn't manage to watch the free practices this time around, and I didn't manage to watch too much of the TV broadcast, which I always like to watch because you always kind of get the vibe. Now, they could have wrapped up their back-to-back Constructors' Championships this weekend in Baku, and for me, it seemed like they weren't actually shouting about that too much. Is that because maybe they thought, actually, we're not going to be the fastest car? We did talk about how the Red Bull was very fast in Monza, and therefore, given that Azerbaijan's got some incredibly fast straights, that we were expecting the Red Bull car to be fast in Baku, which it turned out to be. Do you think that's maybe why McLaren are not too bothered about shouting about this Constructors' Championship, along with, of course, the fact they've got a massive lead and that they will win it?
Yeah, I think you're partly right. I think partly they looked at this weekend and went, we're probably not going to dominate. And then I think it was a 1-3 would have guaranteed them no matter what else happened. And they probably weren't, banking on a 1-3. Plus also, I mean, the points gap is somewhat ridiculous. 623 was played 290, didn't it, before? So they're going to win it. It's just a when, not an if. So I don't think they're out there thinking, right, this is the weekend. They know that if they keep performing and just do the best job they can, eventually it'll happen. They've probably got the T-shirts in a crate somewhere ready to go anyway. They've had that since the summer break, I reckon. They'll bust them out when they need to. But they also know they're in the midst of a championship battle. They still need to win some races, because also, let's not forget, the teams are very much aware, especially the teams at the front, and even more so McLaren. This is the end of this current cycle of rules. They might be pants next year. They might not win any races next year. So they need to maximize the remainder of this year to try and at least, well, they're hoping they're going to be good, but they want to make sure that they finish off this year on a high, so that they maximize the opportunities that they've got.
It is going to be a fascinating sort of transition from 2025 into 2026. And we will talk in a little while about some potential driver seat situations, mainly the one Alpine for 2026, with most of the grid kind of locked in. I still believe that Mercedes don't have a driver signed up for 2026 yet, but I'm sure they'll get that sorted soon. But after the weekend, McLaren are leading by, well, just a mammoth amount of points. What is it? It's 333 points over Mercedes in second on 290. So McLaren on 623 points, which is just absolutely dominant. Ferrari on 286, but look at Red Bull Racing now. Fourth place, 272, so only 14 points behind Ferrari for third place, who are only 4 points behind Mercedes. So you wouldn't bet against Red Bull Racing finishing second, especially if we continue to get some good results, not only from Max Verstappen, but also Yuki Tsunoda as well. And we're going to celebrate Max Verstappen's glory, because we saw him win in Monza. We've seen him win in Azerbaijan this past weekend in Baku. Back-to-back victories, his fourth race win of the season, which seems ridiculous to say after race wins in Japan and back in Bahrain as well. Now, this Red Bull car is obviously incredibly quick in a straight line. When they strip it all out and they make it basically perform in high speed straights, and we know that Azerbaijan, I'm pretty sure it's the longest straight on the calendar, that straight in Azerbaijan. It certainly feels like it when I'm playing it on the game. That's the moment, if you are playing online and you need to maybe check your phone or whatever, you can do it on that straight in Azerbaijan. I wouldn't try it around any of the others. It's basically made to suit that car at the moment, and it doesn't just mean that Max is going to win because that car is going to be good there. He is obviously an incredible driver, and even with the rain in qualifying and rain in everything that was thrown at him while other drivers were making these mistakes, you never really felt like Max was going to make a mistake, did you?
That's exactly it. I mean, we've seen the heights of what Max can achieve. The amazing quali lap he did in Suzuka. This was probably up there as well. He was nearly half a second clear of the rest of the field when no one else could go quicker, and because it was drizzling, and somehow Max found the time to go pole position. But then you mentioned it, just didn't make a mistake, and you don't expect him to. Got through Q1, got through to Q2, seemingly by ease when everyone else was, thinking, oh, we're going to make it through. Q3, bam, lap when it mattered. The only one that could basically challenge Carlos Sainz after he set that blistering lap at the start of the session before the rain started coming down. And he's just inevitable, isn't he? You just have to expect him to be there or thereabouts. There's only a few times this year that he's not had good races, isn't it, realistically? So it's super impressive. And as you mentioned earlier, pole fastest lap race win. Yes, he had clear air. Yes, he got pole position, but he got pole position by a margin. We are just seeing brilliance again. I mean, there's not much more you can say, is there?
There's not much more you can say, but we can pose a question. And with 7 races to go, and 3 sprint races, of course, as well, can Max Verstappen actually get himself back into this title fight and make it 5 in a row? Because he is now, 44 points behind Lando Norris, who's second. He's 69 points behind Oscar Piastri, who leads the championship on 324 points. To most people, that doesn't sound like a lot, but from what I've been reading, I've been checking out what the race say about this. Always good to see what their journalists are saying. And they're basically all saying, well, look, there's an opportunity for Max, but it's incredibly small. But we know Max, he's never going to give up until that opportunity is zero. And I thought, before I ask you, Piers, I'll ask actually someone who's maybe got all of the information in the world, and that is ChatGPT, who I've become a bit obsessed with in the last few months or so. And it's actually run a detailed analysis of the odds and the probability of Max Verstappen winning the championship. And it says here, putting it all together, I'd estimate that Max Verstappen's chances of winning the 2025 Drivers' Championship at somewhere between 5 and 12%, with maybe 8 to 10% being a plausible current probability. Do you agree with ChatGPT? I know it sounds ridiculous to be asking you as an expert in motorsport to be asking a kind of voice on my phone, but I think when you look at the numbers and the kind of points, it doesn't look like that much. But actually, when you look at the probability and you go into it a bit more mathematically, the swing that Max would need to win the championship would mean that, I guess, McLaren would need to have several more stinker weekends and him to get all the points available those weekends.
Yeah, it basically would take him to win pretty much all the races. I think 10% is strong. I think, if you ran 10 seasons from this point onwards, I wouldn't expect Max to win one of them. If you run 100, 2 or 3, yeah, maybe, but not 10. So I think that's a bit of a stretch. Hey, who knows? Maybe ChatGPT will show me up and then it can be the co-host on the On Track podcast next year.
Why not? I mean, ChatGPT, if you're on the free profile, is also free, so technically cheaper than you as well, Piers. But don't worry, I'm not going to replace you anytime soon. I just thought it was interesting because reading all these journalists saying that it doesn't seem like much opportunity. It really is an outside chance. But I think for McLaren, if Max even gets close or stays this kind of distance away, it's a little bit, I don't know, is it a little bit embarrassing given that they have been so dominant? A lot of the journalists that I was reading their thoughts on this after the race were suggesting that Max has had the best season of any driver, because you've kind of got two drivers in McLaren who are having good weekends, but not necessarily, being able to really dominate in the season. And they're saying that Max has probably been the best driver this season.
Max has been the best driver this season. I can't. How can you argue against it? He's won that many races when the McLaren's been dominant. Every time they're not there, he's the one. He's, as I said earlier on, he's inevitable. He's just there. He's just always there, picking up the pieces, doesn't really have a weekend off. And the weekends that haven't been great this season have been for specific circumstances. Yeah, he had that issue in Spain where he kind of lost his rag and a couple of other poor weekends, but Hungary wasn't great, was it? But those weekends, the car has been pretty dire. And there hasn't been that many weekends where the McLaren has been dire. This weekend, it's probably one of the worst the McLarens have had. And yet they've come away with a 6th, or was it a 7th and a nothing. So, but we haven't had any of horrific weekends like that from Max. And he's just metronomic, just so good. And we can't say the same even for our championship leader, Oscar Piastri, who we've sung the praises of a lot. He's had a really good season, but arguably not performing maybe to the level that Max is. And that's just the beast of Formula One, isn't it? That's just the way it is, unfortunately. You need to be in the right car at the right time. But that isn't to say that Piastri maybe next year or the year after couldn't be performing at the same level. That's not to say that if you put Max in the McLaren, he would do the same thing, because it's a whole team effort. He's working well with the Red Bull. He's working well with the team. Maybe the car's not there all the time, but he's able to extract the most out of it. But it's hard to look past Max at this stage. I still don't think he can do it this season, though.
You are right, because we are comparing a 4-time world champion who's been in the sport for, what is it, nearly a decade? It must be nearly a decade now, to Oscar Piastri, who's in the title hunt for the first time this season, and Lando Norris, who was kind of in the title hunt a little bit last season. Again, probability massively against him last season. So, we are comparing people with different levels of experience. It's quite fascinating for me that Max Verstappen has won an F1 race, then he's gone and done a bit of racing in a GT car just for a laugh to get his license the next weekend, and then he's come and won another F1 race. I mean, that's 3 pretty decent weekends in the world of motorsport, isn't it? And in between that, we didn't really hear much from Max because he very much keeps himself to himself, which I think is probably the beauty of Max Verstappen as a character. Looking at the races we've got coming up, then we have 7 races left this season. 3 of them are sprint race weekends. Which of them do you feel Max could potentially score more points at? If we're just sticking on Max Verstappen, we have Singapore next, we have the United States, Mexico, Brazil as a triple header, and then we have the other triple header, which is Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. I mean, Vegas has got some long straights that would potentially suit the Red Bull.
I see the USA, maybe Mexico as opportunities. Mexico is I know it's high downforce because it's such altitude, but Max has been really good there in previous. Qatar definitely could be there. Really flat, medium, high speed corners. I think Max, that car doesn't like it when it's too bumpy. I think Max could be good there. Sao Paulo, the lower speed circuits like Singapore, I think the McLarens are going to be up the road, in my opinion. Who knows? But we'll see. We'll see very shortly. So that's why, looking at the calendar, it doesn't scream to me, Max. But I think I would bet on him winning 1 or more races for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, Qatar the most likely, you'd say.
I'd say.
Must be interesting to be Max Verstappen, knowing that you're going to be waving goodbye to the car that the regulations that depicted the car. You know what I mean? That you had all your success in, because as a dominant driver, he must be wondering what next season holds as much as the rest of the drivers, but also he's been the most successful driver within these regulations. So he must, you'd imagine, have a little bit of, trepidation in his mind.
I don't think trepidation exists in Max Verstappen's mind. He did, okay, to be fair to him, he did win the final championship in 21 of the previous regs, didn't he? Mm-hmm. And he was winning races in 2020 and 19 as well. I think Max knows that he's performing at a level that not many people can touch. And if his car's anywhere near the front, he's going to be there. He won't have any idea. No one has any idea how each of the teams is going to fare against each other next year. Anyone who, says anything other than that, I think is probably overconfident, because even the teams have no idea. They'll have an idea of how much the regulations should increase or decrease the pace, and they'll be like above or below that. But that doesn't mean that other teams aren't higher or lower than that. I think if the car's half competitive, especially with the new regulations, Max is going to be on top of it quickly. An example of why I think that, he was last weekend at the Nürburgring, you mentioned it, GT4, trying to get his Nürburgring license. I think he succeeded in getting that. So he can jump in any car, and does do regularly. He jumps in GT3s and helps his GT team as well. He's going to be very versatile. He's going to be dangerous. Not many of the other drivers do a huge amount of driving, as far as I'm aware, outside Formula One. Max is the exception. And it's a skill being able to drive a Formula One car, but it's also a skill to be able to jump in any racing car and immediately perform and get up to speed and learn new technologies and learn how cars, you need to drive them to get the most out of them. And it's really finer details. And he's the most skilled and talented, shall we say, but also he practices his craft a lot, and especially the work he does in the sim as well, in his own sim, that will have some sort of effect, I think.
It's a very good point. We see it a lot actually in, WEC and Formula E. We see drivers doing different things, and actually it always impresses me to think that, there are weekends where some drivers have been doing Le Mans, and the next weekend they're doing a Formula E race. It's a completely different type of car. So actually there's a lot of respect to them. But yeah, I feel like Max could literally get in a Citroen Saxo and race it against every other driver on that grid, and probably somehow get the best out of Citroen Saxo and win everything, because that is Max Verstappen. So he's third in the championship right now, 255 points, 44 points behind Lando Norris in second on 299, and 69 points behind Oscar Piastri. Scored no points this weekend, 324 points. Oscar leads the championship with 7 races to go and 3 sprint races as well. But anyway, we're going to talk about Max Verstappen's teammate Yuki Tsunoda, because we've been watching Yuki this year and it's been a struggle since he replaced Liam Lawson. He's not performed. He was was he last in the last race at Monza? He was certain towards the back there. For him this weekend, a really strong weekend. He qualified in 6th and he finished the race in 6th to bag himself 8 points, which, given recent results, I think is a strong weekend for Yuki Tsunoda, Piers.
I mean, comparatively it's strong, but if Norris had won the race and Piastri had finished 6th, we'd be saying Piastri's had a pretty poor weekend. And we're set, I think it just shows how difficult the season's been for Yuki so far. The fact that him scoring some points, not even in the top 5, is a good weekend. The mind boggles about the second Red Bull seat. We've discussed it at length. Everyone has. It's hard to get your head around, but He's finished 33 seconds behind Max Verstappen. Granted, Max had clear air, but that's because Max put it on pole. Yuki qualified 6th, got through the difficult qualifying session. So yes, he's had one of his best performances, actually his best performance this season, at one of the more difficult weekends with the wind and the trickiness of the circuit. It's been raining on and off and the grip levels are low and the unpredictability. But still, the fact that his best result this year has been a 6th place when Max has won 4 races. We were talking a moment ago whether Max can win the championship. It's tough, isn't it? It's tough to talk about. And I don't know how I feel about it really, because clearly Max is, and we've spoken about it this podcast, Max is doing amazing. Let's just leave that part that. Yuki hasn't been doing well. And this is what I would, below average from what I'd expect a teammate alongside Max Verstappen to be doing if we ignore the whole Red Bull second seat situation as it's been the last few years. You take any other team, a driver wins a race and then your teammate's 6th. The teammate's going to be asked questions like, what happened? Where was the pace? Why weren't you up with your teammate? What can you do next time to get... I'm sure most of the interviews after the race for Yuki was like, oh, has this weekend been better? What's been the difference? Why has it been so good comparatively for you? Yuki needs to continue to push on, because I don't think this changes much. I think if he continues on the form that he's had this year and the 6th place is the best result, he could be looking at the end of his Red Bull racing days, but maybe even the end of his Formula One days, because even if he finishes 6th in every race going forward, is that enough to convince the Red Bull team and Helmut Marko that he's done enough this year? I'm not even sure. I think he needs to try and get in amongst the points and probably at least a podium at some point if Max continues to be up there on the podium positions.
We'll come back to that in a minute and what the Red Bull situation might look at with the 4 cars next year. Yuki Tsunoda obviously finishing 6th there. Have you noticed anything different with obviously the departure of Christian Horner and the incoming Lauren Mekies, who obviously Yuki worked with at Racing Bulls? Have you noticed any kind of changes in the team there? Is there anything kind of stuck out to you as you've covered it? Or is it too early to say? Or maybe are we not privy to enough information of how things work behind the scenes, which transpire to be things that we notice when we watch as kind of mere fans on TV?
I haven't seen anything so far. We haven't seen anything hugely in the media. There's a bit of a different feel about the team, but that's because of course, most of the contact the media has with the team is through the team principal and the drivers. The drivers haven't changed. Team principal, of course, was Christian and is now Lauren Mekies. I think that there will be just about from now some slight changes being made in terms of the internals. We won't see those from an outside perspective because it will be small and incremental changes that will then snowball over time. For better or for worse, we don't know yet either. But I definitely think it will help the Yuki situation, because it sounded like Yuki was under a lot of pressure. Christian's not one to hold his punches. I think Lauren Mekies seems like a bit more of a nurturing, empathetic character on the surface at least. So I think it will... maybe that has had a part to play in the fact that Yuki's had a good result this weekend. Maybe not. Who knows? But I suppose we'll only know as the season goes on and then maybe into next year whether the Mekies is the right choice. But I would certainly, I think from my perspective, I probably would rather be in Yuki's situation with Lauren as the team principal than Christian, because Christian is very hard-nosed and might make a brash decision about a driver, whereas Lauren might just nurture you a bit longer. Whether that's a strength or a weakness, only, some people will have different opinions and only time will tell. But that's the situation I see at the moment.
He's also got a more technical mind as well. So if Yuki is struggling, it might be that he can maybe get to the bottom of it with the rest of the Red Bull team. Obviously, and not saying that he's the only person that would sit down there as a team principal. He's kind of overseeing things a bit more. But, maybe those conversations, Yuki would respond a little bit better to from a technical point of view, because Christian was maybe a little less technical and more managerial, whereas Lauren is more technical, as we've heard. I guess it's a little bit embarrassing in a way for Red Bull for Liam Lawson to finish 5th, having qualified 3rd. I know that qualifying was a little tricky because he kind of benefited from getting a lap in a bit earlier to kind of put himself up there from the start of Q3. But for Liam to beat Yuki in, a couple of races in a row now, it's not a great look, is it, having made that change so early in the season, which obviously will have dented the confidence of Liam massively.
It's a hard one. The whole Red Bull driver situation, ignoring Max Verstappen, has been weird this year. We've spoken about it throughout the year because we've seen lots of things going on. Pretty much every weekend, the RBs have beaten Yuki, both of them, or at least one of them, which is not something they would expect because their main team, the Red Bull racing team, you would expect, as in years gone by, that you have at least order Red Bull, RB. That's the order you expect if you just ignore all the other cars. That's not what we've had, which is why it's been even more confusing when at the start of the year, Liam wasn't given the time, then it swapped out, and then Liam's generally, especially the second half of the season, has outperformed Yuki. But then if you put Liam back in the car, would then Liam then perform worse? Is the car actually worse than the RB and it's only Max that's making it look good? Is it designed around Max? And I mean, I've got my own opinion about that. I don't think it is, but it is. If that is true, because I might be wrong, then maybe then it doesn't matter who's in that second car. It's such a weird situation. And again, we don't want to go, digging up old stuff, but I don't, hopefully the new regulations change it so that the cars become a lot easier, or the Red Bull car becomes a lot easier for anyone, including Max and a second driver, to drive. And then the problem solves itself. And I think that's probably what Helmut Marko and Lauren Neckes are hoping for.
Yeah, you would imagine so. I've just done some quick maths. Max Verstappen has scored 166 points more than the other three drivers combined, which is kind of ridiculous, really. And we're not going to go over this because this is down to the talent that is Max Verstappen. I think when you're looking at the seats for next season, and this is where we can kind of come back to Yuki Tsunoda and his future in Formula One, every weekend there seems to be more and more talk about Isak Hadjar moving up to be Max Verstappen's teammate. I know he didn't have a great weekend, finishing 10th. There's a bit of a struggle for him this time around. And then the question's over, well, does Yuki go back to Racing Bulls, or does Yuki kind of drop out of the Red Bull system, or does Yuki drop out of Formula One completely? Who comes into that Red Bull system? Is there, we talked about it, there was rumours that Helmut Marko is a big fan of Alex Dunn. Don't think he had a great weekend in F2, and he's obviously part of the McLaren Young Driver Programme. The obvious one that we've heard rumours of all year, even from potentially his manager, perhaps maybe on the choir, is who am I thinking of? Arvid Lindblad, who's in F2 as well. And it seems like maybe that's more of a sure thing to happen. But will he be alongside Liam Lawson, or will he be alongside Yuki? Just everything points towards Yuki not being part of Red Bull going forward. And obviously they're stopping working with Honda, which is a huge draw and something that maybe has a slight inkling, or maybe a huge say in whether Yuki's part of that system, obviously being Japanese and then being a Japanese engine manufacturer. If he is to not be part of the Red Bull situation, where does he land? I mean, there's nowhere for him to really go unless he wants to be a reserve driver, perhaps like we've seen with Valtteri Bottas this year.
Pressure is on Yuki, certainly. I think it's either Red Bull or bust for Yuki. And I think that's why, as I mentioned earlier on, he needs to use this as a launch pad and continue to get some good results. Because I don't see, in my opinion, Yuki staying after the year in Formula One if he can't convince the Red Bull management and that he can perform somewhere near the level of Max, given the change in regulations. Because all he has to do is give them enough of an impetus and enough information. They think, we'll give him a chance in the new car, well, hopefully it will be a bit kinder to our second driver. But at the moment, I mean, even if I was Lauren Neckes, who is, as we've spoken about, potentially more empathetic, I wouldn't be putting Yuki in that car. And then I would almost certainly be promoting Isak Hadjar, because he's been performing very well. What do you do with Liam then? Because is Liam there just as a bench warmer because we've already tried him and him or not? That then leaves a seat at RB. I would assume that it's going to be Arvid Lindblad that moves up. He's the one touted for the seat. He's had a decent season in F2, not set the world alight, but he's come up the ranks pretty quickly, as we've seen like the likes of Anton Lee do. But I think, a lot of the problem still stems from the fact that they haven't really nurtured a driver the likes of Max Verstappen for a long time. They haven't really put all their eggs in one young driver's basket and given them the opportunity to get the experience of the junior formula, dominate the junior formula, move into a building seat at the RB, which it used to be, used to give the drivers a chance, like Max Verstappen a few years at Toro Rosso, until the opportunity comes and then bam, they can hit it and then kick on. We've not really seen that situation. It's been messy. And I think they're going to be looking as a team to try and recultivate that. They saw it. It worked with Vettel. They made it work with Daniel Ricciardo. They made it work with Verstappen. But then ever since Verstappen, it's just been a revolving door of chaos, really. And I think there's a lot of Red Bull juniors in the junior program. And I think that's, in my opinion, part of the problem. I think it actually works better if you have more of a Ferrari or Mercedes type system, where you have fewer drivers, which you give all of your effort and time into, give them an opportunity to really improve, really flourish, and then progress them into Formula One through a junior team. Charles Leclerc, he was at Sauber. then moved to Ferrari, doing very well. It hasn't won a championship, but it's done very well. McLaren did that with Norris. Then you've got, Antonelli hasn't shown it yet, but they did it with George Russell as well. That's worked. I think Antonelli will get there eventually. Whereas this Red Bull situation, they're the churning pot. There's not been any other team, maybe Alpine being the exception, where you've just had a mixing pot of drivers that then no one really stands out. But is that because you've just got too many cooks?
Yeah, potentially. So it does sound like Arvid Lindblad has impressed when he's done his FP1 outings as well. So who knows, Arvid Lindblad may be the next driver in that procession to find and nail down that place and become a world champion, like we've seen, as you said there, with Max Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel. So we'll watch this space on that one. You've mentioned a few drivers there that we're going to talk about in the final part of this show. But I'll just leave you with the thought, are we watching 7 more races in Yuki Tsunoda's Formula One career? It has a high potential. I won't ask ChatGPT about this one though, Piers, because I don't want to offend you twice in one show. A few more things to clear up after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. One in excellent, in expected fashion by Max Verstappen as he cuts into Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri's lead at the top of the Drivers' Championship. Maybe he hasn't got time to win the championship, but I mean, he could definitely catch Lando Norris, I think. Let's look at some of the other drivers. As I was watching this race in Italy, I was expecting to see cars driving down the road with Ferrari flags out the window, with maybe people wearing Kimi Antonelli merchandise. Didn't see any of it actually at all. In fact, no one was flowing, and maybe just in Sicily they don't really do F1. It is quite a long way from Ferrari's home base. What did you make of the Ferraris this weekend? It was another disappointing qualifying for our man Lewis Hamilton.
It was just meh, wasn't it? This weekend they just didn't have it. They just didn't.
Is that why the flags weren't out? Maybe just meh. They just, when if it's good or bad, they've got an opinion. But if it's meh, they're not bothered. They'll just go and eat some more granite or granata, whatever it's called.
Well, it's not. Sicily is not typically a very motorsport or region, is it? So maybe we'll let them off. I think maybe in Milan or somewhere like that, they might be a bit more on it. But yeah, not a good weekend for Ferrari. Charles Leclerc noted in his post-race interview that maybe the cooler conditions didn't really suit them, and they didn't get the car in the window. Just a few things didn't go right for them. The tricky qualifying with the wind and the conditions and it being so close caught Hamilton out, qualified in P12, but actually managed to jump back up into the points in the race. So yeah, I think it was on the lower end of like normal variation, I think, for them. I think they'll be disappointed, but not like worried, because I think they can bounce back. They've got some races coming up where I think they'll do much better. Like Singapore, I think they'll be all right. Okay,
well, if anyone's coming over to Italy, then let us know whether they're flying the flags outside of cars. I have to say, given that they're not a motorsports nation here in Sicily, part of Italy, the driving is certainly that of racing drivers. They are pretty wild on the roads over here. So if you ever come here, make sure you concentrate. Another Italian then, Kimi Antonelli at Mercedes. He was actually over. We kind of talked about it on the show last week when we were doing it from the San Marino MotoGP race. He was there hanging out, as well as Lando Norris, on different days with Valentino Rossi. But it feels like Valentino Rossi's given him some good advice, and he had a very solid weekend in the Mercedes. And obviously George Russell coming second, and once again showing how consistent George Russell has been and kind of in the background this year, which we talked about a lot on this show as well.
Yeah, Russell, good result. He made the alternative strategy work, read the situation well, just used his experience. I think it was an example of two drivers at the front of the field who are peak of their career, got a lot of experience, but still got the speed. Russell made it work. They used the strategy well as well. And then Kimi Antonelli did okay, didn't he? It was fine. Qualifying, he got the lap in when he needed to. Built up the weekend. I still don't think he set the world alight. Again, started fourth, finished fourth. Sounds good, but that's, I think, because, the situation was a bit jumbled with the cars not really being where they were. George did outperform once again. Kimi was closer, but he's still got a little to find. And I think the issue now is it's just the experience, and he's going to be learning weekend on weekend. I still think Kimi's going to get there eventually with George, but it's going to take a while because George has got you forget he's got a wealth of experience now.
Well, he sounded pretty happy with his day's work, his weekend's work on the team radio. And obviously with Kimi coming fourth, very strong weekend for Mercedes, especially with, Red Bull certainly coming up the back and fighting for fourth, third, maybe second place this season in the Constructors' Championship. In between those two drivers on the final classification, getting his first podium for Williams, their first podium for a long time as well, was Carlos Sainz. It was amazing to see him. I'm sure you've seen the video of him like running into the team and jumping into them and all the celebrations that went on there. Started on the front row of the grid alongside Max Verstappen, which is, they've certainly known each other for a while and raced alongside each other for a long time. So that must have been nice for him to be back towards the front end of things. And it just shows that the great work that James Vowles and everyone, including Carlos and Alex Albon, maybe not this weekend so much, are doing at Williams. They really are on the upward trajectory that James Vowles always talks about.
Do you know what? I completely agree. I think this is a great example that Carlos Sainz's podium was partly due to him delivering a lap when he needed to in qualifying, which put him in a great starting position, which allowed him then to have clear air and race well. But he was in a car that was fast enough to be able to set that lap time. I mean, we haven't said that for the last 8-9 years for Williams. They wouldn't have even got to Q3 and got the opportunity to set a lap time, which would have put him on provisional pole until Max Verstappen pipped him. But then the pace in the race genuinely was pretty good. I mean, he finished 19 seconds behind Max Verstappen in the end, which Max is clear of everyone else, got overtaken by George Russell in a Mercedes. I think if you said to Williams at the start of the year, in one of the races, you're going to qualify second, you're going to finish 19 seconds behind Max Verstappen and only get overtaken by George Russell, they'd have been like, on dry pace and pace alone, they'd have absolutely taken that. Alex didn't have a great weekend, did he? Let's be honest. But, it's been up and down. And when with the topsy-turvy weekend that it's been, I think he can get over that. But Sainz, brilliant. And this is the best, really, we've seen him. This is the peak Sainz that we saw towards the end of his Ferrari days. Now he's getting bedded into Williams. I really hope that Williams is good next year, because I think we could see some really good battles between Alex and Carlos, because I think that'll be a good battle. And also, they're consistently performing and giving themselves opportunities to get points on a regular basis and now podiums.
To get Carlos Sainz to sign for Williams, James obviously said the right things, and I guess you've got to come good with those promises, and it feels like he is. The question is, now he's got the first podium, how far away is Carlos Sainz or Alex Albon away from winning a race in that Williams, would you say?
Podium is one thing, a win's another. He was still 19 seconds behind Max Verstappen, and that's when the McLarens aren't there, and the McLarens are looking pretty good at most weekends, not this weekend, but most weekends. I think it would take another weekend with changeable circumstances to see a Williams win, but we're closer than we have been for a long time, and that will please a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the funniest things this weekend, and I know you found this funny, was, and we shouldn't laugh at other people's misfortune, but it was the Alpines, because one of the cars went off. I can't remember which order it was, but one of the cars went off, and then on the same corner, you could see the other car that had gone off, and then the other car went off. And I mean, that was the funniest clips that they shared on the F1 social media, which I caught. And I think the word is calamitous, right?
It wasn't a good look, was it? When you've got one car locking up going wide, and then literally 5 seconds later, the other car goes, "Oh, that's my teammate off in the runoff area. Oops, I've crashed." And then did some pretty big damage. So yeah, Colapinto, just a bit of a lack of concentration. He's still in his first proper year. Not ideal for him either in a qualifying session. I mean, the camera and the light on the world feed cut straight to Flavio, didn't it? I think they knew what they were doing there, because obviously they know that Colapinto's under pressure. Flavio has already insinuated that the Colapinto is not exactly safe in that seat, and crashing on a corner, it was a bit sloppy, wasn't it? It looked a bit like a rookie error. It's not going to exactly help his situation.
That car is the only car, the Colapinto Doohan car, to not score a point this season, which is a problem. And if you're Flavio Briatore, it's a pretty massive problem. He said ahead of the race weekend that, as far as he's concerned, and this was speaking to the race, by the way, that it's a toss-up between Franco Colapinto and Paul Aron for the drive in 2026. I mean, has Franco Colapinto shown you enough that he's got what it takes to lock down that seat, if we forget huge amounts of sponsorship money that probably come with him?
It's hard, because Paul Aron had a decent season in F2 last year. Could have won it if he drove better, but I don't think he had the best finish to the year, did he? And he doesn't scream to me as a driver that needs an opportunity in Formula One. And I think the way that there's enough young talent coming through, and with the drivers in Formula One having longer careers, drivers that come into Formula One, I think, should be drivers that are like, this person needs to be in Formula One. I'm thinking Gabriel Bortoleto last year, off the back of F3 victory, F2 victory, he needed a seat in Formula One. He got it. Paul Aron, it sounds harsh. He had a good, I think it was at third, off the top of my head, I think it was third he finished or somewhere around there, but he was in the hunt. But he didn't set the world alight, didn't win F3. So is he a driver that warrants taking a seat in Formula One when it's so competitive? I don't know. And Franco Colapinto, again, didn't win F3, didn't win F2, got the promotion last year with Williams, showed some promise, but then hasn't done that much better than Doohan, who, again, is another driver I don't think was, again, not banging the door of Formula One down. I think that's the issue. I think in Formula One, the level is now so high with drivers coming in and staying for a long time and performing at that level for so long. You need to be the best of the juniors to come in and actually do well like Bortoletto's doing. I mean, actually, Bortoletto on the points is not doing so well, but he's clearly showing he's got all the ingredients to be a great driver, and he's out qualifying one of the fastest drivers in Hulkenberg. I'm using him as an example because he's one off the top of my head. You've got drivers coming through that maybe do have that pedigree and will have that pedigree. So maybe someone else should have an opportunity in that Alpine, in my opinion.
I mean, and Flavio, I think, was pushed on that, and he was saying, no, it's between those two drivers. So it's interesting whether, drivers, such as, Luke Browning's obviously part of Williams, and Fornaroli, who was winning the championship, it looks like his path is maybe set, and Crawford as well, still part of the Aston Martin situation. And the Aston Martin situation is an interesting one, because we finished the show this week with a kind of little thing that Fernando Alonso suggested in his home country in Spain to one of their journalists, that if 2026 is a good year for them with the new car that Adrian Newey has designed with the new regulations, it may be his last season in Formula One. I think we take from that he wants to go out on a high, and he realises that, he's not got too long left. I'd love to know what you think about that, but also for Jack Crawford, that then kind of gives him maybe a suggestion that, I wouldn't imagine if he comes second or even obviously wins F2, he wouldn't be racing next year. But if he, sticks around for a year, maybe on the sidelines, there could be a seat at Aston Martin for him. Or would they maybe go for someone like a George Russell who may not sign a long-term contract with Mercedes? What do you make of that kind of a bit of a revelation from Alonso? Because it would certainly start a few things rolling, I would feel.
There's a few strands there. I'll start with the Alonso one.
And you've also got barely any time to sum them up. So, I mean,
that's right. Here we go. Quick fire. Here we go. Alonso, here we go. I reckon if the car's really good and if he is in the championship hunt or wins the championship in 26, he'll be back in 27 to try and double down. I think that's rubbish. I think if he's going well, he'll continue on. If he's not, he'll bow out. Who knows? Again, then we've got the whole second seat. Crawford, of course, in that family. But what about Drugovich, who's been waiting around forever? He won F2 and Crawford might not even win F2. Well, there you go.
Felipe Drugovich is going to be a little bit busy next year doing another series, but it's not been announced yet, so I can't really talk to you about that. So I imagine he may be stepping away. Just saying.
But if he gets an F1 opportunity, he might biff that off. Who knows? And then you've got, going back to the Alpine situation, Leo Fornaroli won F3 last year, could win F2. He's a driver banging the door down of F1. Alpine are trying to place someone in there, maybe get Leo Fornaroli isn't affiliated with an F1 team at the moment. If his management aren't knocking on the door of Flavio at the moment, then they're not doing their job.
You've summed that up beautifully. Piers, we'll talk to you again very, very soon. Of course, we have Singapore coming up as well next week. We will look ahead to that on this show as well as some other bits and bobs as well. Don't forget you can watch anything you've heard here on the talkSPORT Driving YouTube channel, which is well worth subscribing to. And we'll take you behind the scenes at some more motorsport stuff coming up very soon. We're going to be heading over back to Italy for Monza and Donington Park in the GB3 Championship and loads of other stuff, including more MotoGP as well. Thank you very much for listening or watching, and we will catch you next week on Track from talkSPORT.